Hello, all you true crime fans. I'm Carrie Drobin, and welcome to Crime Stands Still Deep Cuts, where everyone has a story, but not everyone has a voice. It's January 15th, 1947, Los Angeles. Betty Bersinger was walking down Norton Avenue with her 3-year-old daughter when she saw it, something pale, lying in the grass near the sidewalk. At first, she thought it was a discarded mannequin. But as she got closer, a terrible chill passed through her. When she realized it was a woman's body, bisected at the waist, her arms were carefully posed above her head, her face had been mutilated, a deep, jagged smile cut from ear to ear. There was no blood at the scene, none. It was as if her body had been drained and washed clean. At first, the victim was listed as Jane Doe number 1, but within days the press would give her another name, the Black Dahlia. And her case would become the most notorious unsolved murder in American history. London has Jack the Ripper, New England has the Boston Strangler, Los Angeles has the Black Dahlia. Her murder has spawned countless books, documentaries, movies, even video games. Her name has become part of the American crime mythos, a symbol of old Hollywood's dark underbelly. There's Black Dahlia perfume, Black Dahlia lingerie, Black Dahlia t-shirts. At the Biltmore Hotel, where she was last seen alive, the bar serves a cocktail named after her. There's even a Michigan death metal band called the Black Dahlia Murder. The victim was last seen sitting on a couch in the elegant hotel's lobby with its Spanish and Italian Renaissance design, Moorish ceilings, lavish murals, wearing a black suit, sheer blouse, black suede high-heeled pumps, and jet black hair. The press crucified her. Hollywood commodified her, and the LAPD failed her. In fact, the Black Dahlia case remains open, actively assigned to LAPD Detective Mitzi Roberts since the lead investigator retired in 1960. And after all these years, she still gets about one call a week from people with theories, repressed memories, who tell her the killer was their dad or their uncle or their neighbor. The case has inspired an obsessive, almost cult-like following. Larry Harnish, one of the most knowledgeable Black Dahlia experts, thinks it's because it's unsolved, it's horrific, and it's classic noir. The woman's body was found in a vacant lot in South Los Angeles, surgically severed in two. She had been washed and scrubbed clean, and the grotesque smile that had been carved on her face had been done so, apparently, while she was still alive. But before she became a symbol of Hollywood's dark chapter, our victim, Elizabeth Short, aka Black Dahlia, was just Beth, a pretty girl from a small town who was already haunted by loss. And that's where the real story begins. Beth grew up in Medford, Massachusetts, the third of 5 sisters. Her father built miniature golf courses until the Great Depression wiped him out. One day, when Beth was just 6 years old, he left his car parked near a bridge, and the family believed he'd jumped. Years later, he sent a letter to Beth's mother explaining that he had faked his suicide and was actually living in California. He promised to come home, but her mother was done. Beth, too, would later leave Massachusetts for California, chasing a different kind of life. The prettiest of her sisters, people said that Beth was magnetic. You couldn't help but notice her, but there was also something sad about her. Beth had asthma, which made the brutal Boston winters unbearable, so during the war, she headed south first to Florida to escape the cold, and that's where she met Major Matt Gordon Jr., a P-51 pilot stationed in the Burmese theater. Matt Gordon proposed in a letter from overseas, and Beth, of course, said yes. She wrote him 27 letters in 11 days, but 5 days before VJ Day, Gordon's plane went down, and he never made it home. And Beth never recovered. It's easy to paint Beth as another wannabe starlet chewed up and spit out by Hollywood, but that's not who she was. The truth is actually much simpler and far more tragic. She wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing connection. After her lover died, Beth drifted. In the summer of 1946, she moved to Long Beach for one reason, to reconnect with, strangely, another Gordon, another pilot she had dated before the war. They met up, spent some time together, but the romance fizzled. She later wrote to him, "Perhaps Matt was my man. That's why I've been so miserable." It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't noir. Beth wasn't an actress or femme fatale. She was just a young woman, grieving and alone. But that story wasn't sensational enough. So Jack Webb, in his book The Badge, published over a decade after the murder, told a different story about the mother who found Elizabeth Short's body. But it wasn't true. That mother, Bersinger, was interviewed decades later by another author, sleuth, Harnish. Here's the real story. She said she had been pushing her 3-year-old daughter in a tailor-taught stroller. Not just any stroller, but a tailor-taught, which was popular in the 1940s and designed to transition from a stroller to a walker. She was transporting her tot to a repair shop to pick up her husband's shoes. She and her husband had recently bought their home for $11,000 in an expensive neighborhood full of newly married couples and young families. She was walking along Norton Avenue, carefully navigating around the broken glass that littered the sidewalk. And that's when she saw it, the very dead white body. The victim was face up, her gray-blue eyes startled open, fixed on the sky. She had been posed, with her elbows bent at right angles, her hands above her head, her legs spread apart. The chunk of flesh that had been sliced from her thigh was later discovered to have been a rose tattoo. The press descended like vultures, labeling her promiscuous, a liar, a grifter. But the truth is, Beth's life was already fiction before the press got their hands on it. She claimed she was an actress, but never went to an audition. She claimed to be a war widow, but never married. She claimed she had a baby who died, but never had a child. In fact, she borrowed pieces from other people's lives to survive. And then, someone took her life. But the real Beth wasn't just murdered. She was erased. Identifying Elizabeth Short didn't take long. Her fingerprints were already on file because she had applied for a clerk job at Camp Cook during World War II. They also had her prints from an arrest for underage drinking in Santa Barbara. A reporter from the Examiner, Wayne Sutton, used a particularly heartless tactic to gather information about her. He called Elizabeth's mother, Phoebe, and lied. He told her Elizabeth had won a beauty contest, and Phoebe began reminiscing about her daughter's childhood, about her triumphs in school. And when the reporter finally told Phoebe what had really happened to her daughter, she collapsed. The press was ruthless. Reporters beat detectives to several key locations, including a bus station where Elizabeth Short had checked her belongings before her death. The newspaper, The Examiner, informed the LAPD that they would hand over the luggage, but only if detectives opened it at the Examiner's offices. The cops, left with no alternatives, reluctantly agreed, and inside the luggage were photos of Elizabeth, letters from boyfriends, and personal items. The newspaper printed it all. Reporters and detectives raced to track down the boyfriends identified in the letters, and during World War II, crime surged in LA and generated such interest that the Examiner ran a daily tally on the front page. On the day Elizabeth Short's body was discovered, the paper reported 2 murders, 13 robberies, and 47 burglaries. Then, 10 days after Elizabeth Short's murder, the killer himself reached out. An envelope arrived at the newspaper, the Examiner, addressed in letters cut from a page of movie ads. The message read in all caps and bold, "Heaven is here." Inside were Short's birth certificate, social security card, and personal papers, even an address book with 75 male names. Police had to follow up on every single one of them. Nothing. And the envelope itself, brushed with gasoline to eliminate fingerprints. Other letters from anonymous senders who claimed to be the killer were delivered to the LAPD and the newspapers, but they were never authenticated. Detectives were inundated with false confessions and false accusations. A former member of the Women's Army Corps claimed that Elizabeth Short stole her man, so she killed her and cut her up. In 2003, Steve Hodel, a retired LAPD homicide detective, published his best-selling book, Black Dahlia, Avenger. And in it, he had his own theory. You ready for this? His own father, Dr. George Hodel, murdered Elizabeth Short. Dr. Hodel wasn't just any suspect. He was a wealthy Hollywood socialite, a brilliant physician who ran a venereal disease clinic and partied with actors and bohemians in a house designed by Lloyd Wright, the son of Frank Lloyd Wright. Hodel's life was steeped in glamour and, as Steve would argue, darkness and depravity. Steve's theory began with a photo album he inherited after his father's death. Inside were 2 photographs of a woman he swore was Elizabeth Short. That discovery sent him spiraling down the rabbit hole. Dr. George Hodel was already a man with secrets. In 1949, he was accused of molesting his 14-year-old daughter, Tamar. But during the trial, Tamar accused her father of killing Elizabeth Short. But a psychiatrist testified that Tamar was a pathological liar, and George was acquitted. Then there was the infamous recording. Dr. George Hodel's house had been bugged by the LAPD, and he was caught on tape saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia." They couldn't prove it now. But immediately after, he said something else. "I wonder if they're listening to me right now." Was it a confession or a taunt? Steve Hodel didn't stop there. He claimed his father also killed Jean French, the victim in the infamous red lipstick murder. And then he linked him to at least 25 other murders, including the Zodiac killings in Northern California. Stephen Kay, a Los Angeles deputy DA, believed him and said this: "If George Hodel were alive today, I'd file 2 counts of murder against him for the Dahlia and the red lipstick murders." But the LAPD's cold case unit disagreed with Steve Kay's evidence. Those photographs? They said the woman wasn't Elizabeth Short. Short's surviving sister agreed, and the claims of a police cover-up? Not a shred of proof. Critics panned Steve's book. The LA Times called it, quote, "revolting twaddle." The LA Weekly called it, quote, "gobbledygook." But the theory stuck, because Dr. George Hodel was on the LAPD's original list of suspects, and because Elizabeth Short's body had been bisected with surgical precision, a cut so clean it could only have been done by a skilled surgeon. But the Black Dahlia killer? It's never been proven. No confession, no DNA, no hard evidence whatsoever. And in the end, Hodel's theory became less about Elizabeth Short and more about Steve Hodell's own complicated relationship with his father. He said, "I spent my entire career hunting men like my father, and I miss the one in front of me." 78 years have passed since Elizabeth Short was found mutilated in a vacant lot. If this case happened today, would we actually know who killed Elizabeth Short? Forensic evidence that didn't exist in 1947, such as DNA analysis, advanced fingerprinting, trace blood, fiber analysis, might have cracked the case wide open. Today's crime scene preservation protocols would have prevented contamination. We wouldn't have had reporters traipsing around our crime scene. Tire tracks and footprints would have been documented. And that package sent to the examiner would have been tested for DNA, hairs or fibers that could have been matched to a suspect. Without hard proof, speculation becomes entertainment. John Gregory Dunn fictionalized the Dahlia murder in his 1979 novel True Confessions, which portrayed her as a prostitute. Dunn and his wife Joan Didion wrote the screenplay for the movie version starring Robert De Niro and Robert Duvall. Kenneth Anger's Hollywood Babylon 2, published in 1984, introduced lurid crime scene photos of Elizabeth Short's body to a new generation, reigniting widespread fascination with the case. But was it true? Who knows? James Ellroy, one of America's most famous crime novelists, became obsessed with the Dahlia case after receiving a copy of The Badge as a birthday present from his father. Ellroy was just 11 years old, 8 months after his mother was murdered, when he read the Dahlia section more than 100 times. The case became his way of processing his own loss. He channeled this obsession into his 1986 novel, The Black Dahlia, which suggested that Short had appeared in stag films. The book became a bestseller and was adapted into a widely panned film by Brian De Palma. But I'd like to believe that crime stories are not supposed to be sensational, that they should have a message behind them. They can't just be entertainment. The lead that almost broke the case when author sleuth Larry Harnish first started researching the Black Dahlia. He wasn't trying to solve it, he says. He wasn't one of those Dahlia freaks, the crime buffs who chased wild theories and drew red strings across walls. He just wanted to tell Elizabeth Short's story accurately, to clear up the myths, to give her back her humanity. But then he stumbled upon a discovery that changed everything. While working on the 50th anniversary article of the murder, Harnish decided to interview legendary FBI profiler John Douglas, the man who practically invented criminal profiling. And Douglas asked him a simple but penetrating question. He said, "What do you know about the neighborhood?" The choice of dump site was unusual. The killer had options. In half an hour, he could have driven to the beach or the mountains. He could have driven out to the desert, but instead, he left the body in a busy residential neighborhood where he could have been seen and caught. So did he mean to shock and horrify by posing Short's body, or send a message that she was a slut and disposable? More importantly, the choice of location suggested that the killer had some connection to the neighborhood. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he knew someone there. Suddenly the case shifted from a Hollywood noir to a local story about the neighborhood surrounding Norton Avenue. Was there a connection between the killer and the crime scene? The area where Short's body was found had once been part of a Spanish land grant, which was later subdivided into neighborhoods. The specific area where Short's body was found had been developed by Walter H. Leimert, a major figure in Los Angeles real estate. Leimert Park, now a historically black neighborhood, still bears his name. city archives, police commission meeting notes from the era, and building records and zoning permits reveal that at one time, mob boss Jack Dragna had lived just 4.5 blocks from the crime scene. Organized crime was rampant in Los Angeles during the post-war period, and Dragna controlled much of it. But nothing connected Dragna to Short's murder, and nothing about Norton Avenue particularly stood out. So once again, the trail went cold, until Harnish discovered something else. A box, stuffed with photocopies of newspaper clippings, transcript of the coroner's inquest, and random memorabilia related to Short's life. Most of it was junk. But inside was a dim, smudged photocopy of a marriage certificate belonging to Elizabeth Short's oldest sister, Virginia. It had been copied so many times that some of the details were hard to read. The witnesses addressed looked like it might say Norton Avenue, but the copy was too blurry. The original was on file in Sacramento. And once a certified copy was received, when it arrived, it listed the address as 3959 Norton Avenue, a block from where Short's body was found. It was a new connection, a connection no one had seen before. It meant that someone close to Short, her sister's friend, a family contact, had lived practically across the street from the crime scene. Suddenly, the case wasn't so random anymore. The witness was listed as Barbara Lindgren. That name had never appeared in any previous research. She wasn't mentioned in any interviews or police reports. Who was she? If she was a connection to Elizabeth Short, and Lindgren had ties to the neighborhood, or worse, to someone who lived nearby, it could unravel the entire mystery. The idea that Short's killer knew her personally had always lingered on the margins of the case was something new. The crime had been too intimate, too carefully posed, too precise to be the work of a random thrill killer. John Douglas's profile suggested that the killer wanted Short found, that the killer wanted to send a message. So if Barbara Lindgren was the missing link, it might explain why Short was killed and why her body was left exactly where it was. But who was Barbara Lindgren? The phone directories from the 1940s were no help. The LA Times archives were a dead end. Elizabeth Short's sister and brother-in-law were long dead. There was no one left to ask. That's when Harnish descended into the dim sub-basement of the Los Angeles County Hall of Records. It was like a scene out of Chinatown. Jake Giddey searching through plat books to uncover a real estate conspiracy. Harnish pored over the heavy, crumbling volumes of property deeds and tax records for the 3900 block of South Norton Avenue, working his way through the entries from the 1940s. And then, there it was, 3959 Norton Avenue. The house was listed under the name Ruth Bailey. Ruth Bailey had been married to Dr. Walter Bailey, a prominent Los Angeles surgeon with a direct connection to Norton Avenue and to Elizabeth Short's family. Bingo! Barbara Lindgren, the witness listed on the marriage certificate, was Ruth Bailey's daughter, which meant that Bailey's wife and Elizabeth Short's sister were socially connected. It couldn't be a coincidence. But why would Walter Bailey murder Elizabeth Short? And who was Dr. Walter Bailey? He'd been one of the most respected doctors in Los Angeles. He'd studied medicine at USC and completed his residency at Los Angeles County Hospital. And during World War I, he had served as a surgeon in France. After the war, he opened a private practice in downtown LA, where he specialized in performing hysterectomies and mastectomies. His office was only a few blocks from the Biltmore Hotel, the last place Elizabeth Short was seen alive. But there's more. Bailey had left his wife Ruth and his family in 1946, the year before Short was murdered, for a younger female physician named Dr. Alexandra Partika. According to court records, Bailey had rewritten his will before his death, disinheriting Ruth at Partika's insistence. Ruth claimed in a lawsuit that Partika had blackmailed Bailey, threatened to expose some dark secret unless he left his family for her. A copy of Bailey's contested will listed the contents of his office, down to the serial numbers of his typewriters and the names of his creditors, but it also included something chilling: a collection of surgical films. Bailey and Partika used to eat dinner together in his office while watching surgery films. I mean, that's off the charts weird, right? Retired doctors who had worked with Bailey all agreed that toward the end of his life, Bailey had changed. His colleagues and relatives were disturbed by his personality shift. He became angry, unpredictable, and volatile, paranoid about being exposed. Exposed for what, though? Bailey's death certificate revealed something even more intriguing. One of the listed causes of death was encephalomalacia, a structural lesion in the brain, softening of brain tissue caused by trauma or illness. It turns out the location of the lesion and the cause, as well as when it occurred, could have a significant impact on behavior, including bizarre violence. Bizarre violence? A surgeon with a neurological impairment whose personality changed, living just blocks from the crime scene. That's not nothing. And according to experts, the Black Dahlia mutilation had all the hallmarks of a one-time killer. I think he did it, Harnish said years later. I don't have a smoking gun, but I do have a scalpel. Whoever killed the Black Dahlia positioned her body the way a surgeon would on an operating table. And Bailey didn't just want to kill her. He wanted everyone to see it. So, what was the trauma that led up to the murder, and how would Elizabeth have known Walter? Ruth Bailey was connected to the Short family through Virginia's wedding, right? Her daughter, Barbara Lindgren, had been the matron of honor. Maybe someone gives Elizabeth advice, says something like this: if you're ever in trouble, if you ever need help, call the Baileys. But if Elizabeth followed that advice, if she did call Walter Bailey while she was couch surfing at the Biltmore, could it have cost her her life? Here's a little known fact. Walter Bailey had a son. In 1920, Bailey's son was riding his bike when he saw his younger sister stepping off the sidewalk into traffic. He rode toward her to protect her and was hit by a truck. He died instantly. Dr. Bailey was devastated. The accident haunted him for the rest of his life. And Ruth Bailey had been the one responsible for watching the children that day. Bailey never forgave her. Could that have been the source of Dr. Bailey's rage? Bailey's son died on January 13, 1920. Elizabeth Short's body was found on January 15th. Did Dr. Bailey, emotionally fragile, haunted by guilt, possibly suffering from brain damage, kill Elizabeth Short on the anniversary of his son's death? Could Bailey have wanted to send a message to Ruth Bailey and Barbara Lindgren, a grotesque reminder of the son they lost? While Bailey seems to be the most plausible suspect, the case remains unsolved, and the crime stands still. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow and bring you more cases like this Until then, stay tuned.